To this now, the fate of nearly $2 billion federal dollars hangs in the balance for the most prestigious university in the country. President Donald Trump put Harvard and other Ivy League schools in the administration's crosshairs, largely over how they handled anti-Semitism on campus. Well, tomorrow, the fight over funding will start to play out in court. For a preview, CNN's Gloria Pazmino spoke with an alum who's fighting to protect Harvard's research.
It's the next major step in the Trump administration's fight against Harvard University.
I think we're going to probably settle with Harvard. They want to settle very badly.
Oral arguments are expected Monday. Federal District Court Judge Allison Burroughs will hear from Harvard's legal team and lawyers for the Department of Justice, the beginning of a critical battle to restore more than $2 billion in federal funding after the White House froze the funds last spring.
We spend more money on higher education than any other country, and yet they're turning our students into communists and terrorists. We can't let this happen.
Monday's hearing could mark a turning point in the administration's ongoing attacks on higher education institutions.
What we're seeing here is basically an attack on Harvard. The goal is to narrow our ability to think, to teach, to voice, to learn in a way that is open, that promotes free inquiry and discussion.
Pause or funding freeze.
Days after taking office, President Donald Trump signed an executive order increasing enforcement efforts against anti-Semitism on school campuses. The administration also targeted dozens of colleges and universities. It threatened to cut Harvard's critical research and funding grants unless it met a strict list of demands, including ending diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, hiring new faculty, and making sweeping changes to international student programs. Harvard responded with force, suing to restore its funding and accusing the administration of using unlawful tactics, saying the cuts and demands, quote, cut at the core of Harvard's constitutionally protected academic freedom. Funding cuts are already being felt.
We're seeing those research projects about Alzheimer's disease, about what is it that how do we do surgeries in a way that are actually going to save people's lives? Those research projects, those efforts that have been going on for years, if not decades, are being stopped in their tracks.
Harvard faculty says the future of scientific research is on the line.
The big picture question is whether we will be rewarding research to where, based on scientific merit, or whether a university follows the political ideology of the president and his administration.
In a statement, the White House said the administration's goal is to prevent anti-Semitism and DEI on Harvard's campus, adding, quote, we are confident that Harvard will eventually come around and support the president's vision, and through good faith conversations and negotiations, a good deal is more than possible. As the fight between the administration and Harvard continues, some faculty members and experts see the administration's focus on anti-Semitism as an excuse.
This is a battle about power. I think that this is really about this administration trying to take down cathedrals of power around the country that are not their own.
Gloria Pazmino, CNN, New York.
All right, to talk about all this with me now is CNN legal analyst Michael Moore. Michael, thank you so much for being here to talk all things Harvard. Appreciate it. Let's just start simple here. What can we expect likely from court tomorrow?
Yeah, so this is really a push by the university to have an expedited case, a summary judgment hearing, and they're essentially saying, Judge, we think you can make this decision based on the papers and the law. We just don't think you need to go any further than this, and so the court has given them a quick hearing. You would usually expect something like this to drag out when there's a lawsuit filed. This has not been the case. It's just been a few months. But I also think the court is cognizant of the fact that there's real harm that could happen if there's not a ruling now. Obviously, we're getting into the next academic year. And I'm sure the judge is also thinking about the avenues of appeal that are likely to come no matter which side prevails.
I appreciate you talking about time, because I was curious from your perspective if that was a real consideration. I was up at Harvard during commencement talking to professors about their research and everything. And at least one of them said that if funding was cut, the freezers that they kept data might have to get turned off. So time is actually considered here?
Sure. I mean, there are ongoing studies. I mean, there are laboratory things happening. There've been Alzheimer's research, cancer research. There's all these things that are the people are in the middle of it. And you think about clinical trials, people participating in those trials. There's about $3 billion in funding that has been either cut off or is in the process of being cut off. That's a real issue for an institution trying to run, a research program and other, educational programs as well.
Yeah, and again, across many schools as well,
Right.
the
That's
medical
right.
school, the regular college, et cetera.
Right.
I want to get your perspective, though, because we've been talking about this back and forth with, two titans, the federal government and one of our most prestigious universities. From your perspective, who, though, has the upper hand, do you think?
Yeah, I'm just sort of like, thank God somebody finally stood up to them. You've watched law firms around the country sort of cave, and they've cut deals, or media empires have cut deals saying, well, just leave us alone and we'll pay some money or we'll do what you want to do. I really think in this case that the institution has the strongest argument.
Really?
I think the judges sort of you've seen that. I mean, I don't think we're here at this point on an expedited basis because she thinks they've got a weak case. I think we saw it also when we talked about international students and how
Student
they were being
visas,
treated.
right.
That was a very quick, outcome where the administration was shot down. And so here, really what the administration is saying is if you don't teach and do things the way we want you to do it, this particular administration, not the Constitution, but my administration, then I'm going to cut your funding out. And that's so antithetical to what an academic institution is that I think their position is stronger, that being the college. And also, there have been a lot of other universities that have signed on and joined into the lawsuit
Right.
supporting that. So we're not talking about Harvard standing alone. Now we're seeing sort of this mushrooming effect of other groups coming in saying, absolutely, you can't have this because you're violating our free speech and other provisions under the law.
Do you think this judge in this district, where it's happening, will play into that, just being in Boston up there?
Judges typically wear a neutral hat, or we think they wear a neutral
Sure.
hat, but I also think they don't live in a vacuum. And so it's likely that she is obviously part of the local community, and my guess is probably cognizant of the impact it could have on a broader scheme. But again, this is not really a question of so much of a factual basis. Everybody agrees that they've cut our funding, and we have these initiatives in place, or we're not doing this, or we've drawn our red line in the sand if you're the college or the university. This is a question to me about the law, and ultimately an appellate court's going to have to decide, are they going to let sort of an administration come in and say, okay, you don't agree with us, we're going to now cut you out. Think about what that means down the road. That means, Notre Dame. What if you have a more liberal administration, Democratic administration, or a more moderate Republican administration come in and say, we don't like some of the things that you're teaching there. We don't like the fact that you don't teach this. So we're going to cut your funding. Are we going to see now you can't get a federal loan if you go to a religious institution, or that we're going to cut funding for what I would consider to be sort of more conservative-leaning institutions? Sure. Is that going to be the case? That seems to be a flux and a balance that can't be struck as we go down the road. And courts are supposed to make life sort of normal and not leave everything in flux.
Just real quick, because we got to go in a second. Were you surprised that this even made it to court? Just because other schools have been cutting deals. I mean, we saw the University of Pennsylvania cut a deal over the transgender swimmer issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the kind of issue that should have made it to court. You can, when you're telling an institution and sort of making up this idea of some civil rights things and pushing things to the limits, I think, which the administration has done. I think the fact that Harvard has stood up to them and said, we're not going to let you come in and tell us exactly how we should teach. There are things that need to be in place, like we want to make sure that we don't discriminate against people. We
Sure.
want to make sure, that women's athletes, athletics, and men's athletics are treated equally. There are things like that the law says, but to come in and say this person's got to resign, this administrator's got to do this, those are just not what we think about when we think about colleges, and that's where they're supposed to be places of higher learning, and we push ourselves to think, not just to all get in line behind one particular president.
Tomorrow, all eyes on Boston and Cambridge once again.
All eyes.
Appreciate it, Michael.
Great
Thank you so
being with
much.
you.